Batman movies are big business in Hollywood, obviously, and as a result, just about everyone and their uncle wants to get in on the action. That's why, in addition to attracting A-list talent to lead roles across the Caped Crusaders' various big screen iterations, Batman on film has also seen celebrities begging their way into distracting cameo roles, and overqualified actors simply being happy to show up for a single, solitary scene. From the lows of Joel Schumacher to the highs of the Christopher Nolan years, Batman has never been a stranger to shoehorning weird and wonderful cameos into the mix, from the cringeworthy to the amazing. So with that in mind, I'm Will for Culture, and here are the 10 weirdest ever cameos in Batman movies. Number 10, Elle Macpherson, Batman and Robin. Though it's not uncommon for Bruce Wayne to have a glamorous, beautiful woman on his arm, Joel Schumacher's Batman and Robin took this to parodic levels by casting legendary model Elle Macpherson as Wayne's well-to-do girlfriend, Julie Madison. Macpherson's role in the movie ultimately extends to little more than proposing to Bruce and being awkwardly rebuffed, before basically disappearing out of the movie entirely. Most of Macpherson's scenes as Julie were actually cut from the final film, including being stabbed to death by Poison Ivy. The part was ultimately whittled down to a totally bizarre, perfunctory cameo that couldn't hold a candle to Vicky Vale or Selina Kyle from the previous Batman movies. Given that Julie was a relatively prominent love interest in the earlier Batman comics, it was a pretty disappointing treatment. Number 9, Paul Reubens and Diane Salinger, Batman Returns. Say what you want about Batman Returns' silly excesses, but Tim Burton did a fantastic job making Oswald Cobblepot, aka the Penguin, an all-time cinematic antagonist for the Caped Crusader. This extended to delving into the villain's tragic backstory, where his parents, disgusted at their son's disfigured appearance, threw him into Gotham Sewer, where he was adopted by the Penguins living down there. If you were paying close attention, however, you might have noticed that the parents, Tucker and S. the Cobblepot, were played by Paul Reubens and Diane Salinger, who of course co-starred as Pee-wee Herman and his pal Simone in 1985's Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which Burton also directed. In Reubens' case, the cameo was especially strange and unexpected, as the actor was still living down his arrest for pleasuring himself in a porno theater the year prior. Number 8, Senator Patrick Leahy, Batman Forever, Batman and Robin, The Dark Knight Rises, and Batman v Superman. Vermont Senator Patrick Leahy gets a very special designation on this list because not only is he clearly not an actor or an entertainer of any kind, but he actually made cameo appearances in 5 live-action Batman movies to date. Leahy is a huge fan of comic books and the Caped Crusader in particular, having written various forewords and essays in popular Batman comic books, and even voicing a governor in an episode of Batman the Animated Series. But the politician was also able to use his clout to land cameo roles in many Batman films, appearing as himself in both of Joel Schumacher's movies while playing a Wayne Enterprises board member in Christopher Nolan's latter 2 films. Memorably, Leahy was the older gentleman who told the Joker in The Dark Knight, "We're not intimidated by thugs," to which the Clown Prince replied, "You remind me of my father. I hated my father," while holding him at knife point. Leahy's most recent appearance in a DC movie was Batman v Superman, where he played Senator Purrington, who partakes in the congressional grilling of Superman and is then presumably blown to smithereens along with everyone else. Keep your eyes peeled for him whenever the Robert Pattinson starring The Batman actually comes out. Number 7, En Vogue, Batman Forever. 90s R&B sensation En Vogue made a most odd cameo appearance in Batman Forever, during the scene in which Dick Grayson steals the Batmobile and drives it around Gotham's dingy back streets. The musical quartet appear briefly as prostitutes loitering outside of a club when Robin pulls up. After knocking on the door of the Batmobile and being met with the fresh-faced Dick, one of the group exclaims, "That's Batboy," as they all break into laughter. Viewed today, it's a relatively unobtrusive cameo, though at the time of the film's release, you'd need to have been living under a very large rock not to know who En Vogue were. They probably deserved a more dignified cameo than this, but you can't knock their enthusiasm. Number 6, Noel GUGLIEMI, The Dark Knight Rises. You might not know the name Noel GUGLIEMI, but you will almost certainly recognize the guy's face because he's unquestionably Hollywood's go-to when they need someone to play Southern Californian gangsters. GUGLIEMI's most high-profile role to date is that of Hector in the Fast and the Furious franchise, but if you're watching a movie which features a Mexican gangbanger, there's a strong chance he'll show up, having also appeared in the likes of Training Day, Bruce Almighty, Crank, The Walking Dead, and The Purge: Anarchy. However, Noel's visibility and comical typecasting also means that most serious productions tend to avoid casting him, so quite the surprise it was when he made a brief yet intensely distracting appearance in The Dark Knight Rises. Noel plays a former inmate at Blackgate Penitentiary who now works as one of Bane's cronies, leading dissenters out onto the ice for their exile. Thankfully, he's only in the movie for a few moments, but given Nolan's typical eye for smart casting, this was a bizarre and amusing oversight. Number 5, Drew Barrymore, Batman Forever. Remember when Drew Barrymore appeared in Batman Forever? No? If you haven't seen the film in quite some time, it's easy to forget that the on-the-rise actress showed up briefly as Sugar, one of Two-Face's assistants representing his good side. Barrymore had certainly proven herself worthy of a more substantial blockbuster role at this point in her career, so seeing her shoehorned into an eye candy cameo felt like a massive waste, even if a lingerie-clad Barrymore surely made sitting through the movie slightly less insufferable for many. She did fine with what little material she had, even if giving Two-Face two diametrically opposed lackeys who literally split his lair straight down the middle was a tad too obvious, even for this movie. Number 4, Thomas Lennon, The Dark Knight Rises. Many were taken aback when comedy actor Thomas Lennon showed up in The Dark Knight Rises as the sarcastic doctor who explains to Bruce Wayne that he's in terrible physical condition, ending with the memorable sign-off, "I cannot recommend that you go heli-skiing." Lennon is of course best known for playing Lieutenant Jim Dangle on hit comedy series Reno 911, and so seeing him show up for a few minutes in Christopher Nolan's trilogy bookending epic was rather on the jarring side. But there is a relatively logical explanation for this. Lennon actually played a doctor in Nolan's 2000 classic thriller Memento, so this was clearly a playful nod to that role. And while Lennon slotted effortlessly into the ensemble in that movie, being an unknown at the time, his profile had blown up huge by the time The Dark Knight Rises released in 2012, so seeing him riffing off Christian Bale was a neat yet peculiar viewing experience indeed. Number 3, Jesse Ventura, Batman and Robin. While most Bat fans have a mental block placed on Batman and Robin, wrestling fans would have had majorly raised eyebrows when WWE legend, occasional actor and future governor of Minnesota, Jesse Ventura, showed up as a security guard at Arkham Asylum. Ventura isn't just hanging out as a background artist though, he actually gets a few one-liners opposite Poison Ivy before she plants a murderous lip lock on him, bringing his small appearance to an abrupt end. Ventura's cameo is especially amusing, however, given that his character is guarding Mr. Freeze, who happens to be played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. Ventura, of course, co-starred with Arnie in his popular 80s action films, Predator and The Running Man. It's fair to say that the third time most certainly wasn't the charm for their collaborations, though props to Ventura for not letting his involvement with the film tank his governor bid less than 2 years later. Number 2, Jack Gleeson, Batman Begins. Game of Thrones fans who revisited Batman Begins for the first time since HBO's hit fantasy show launched were in for quite the shock when they realized that historic douchebag Joffrey Baratheon himself, Jack Gleeson, had a cameo in the film. 12-year-old Gleeson shows up as a young boy who briefly interacts with Batman, "It's you, isn't it?" and is saved from Gotham's criminals by Rachel Dawes. Though Nolan obviously could have never known that Gleeson would go on to play one of the most widely loathed villains in TV history, his presence undeniably recontextualizes the scene in a totally distracting way. At the time of Batman Begins' release, many fans suspected that Gleeson was actually playing a young version of Robin, the red shirt and all, and following the release of The Dark Knight Rises, the theory evolved to suggest he was in fact a young John Blake. Probably nonsense though. Probably. Number 1, Coolio and Corey Haim, Batman and Robin. Barbara Gordon's infamous motorcycle chase scene in Batman and Robin is made mildly more interesting by a double dose of surprise cameos. First off, Coolio appears as the man who fires the starting gun for the race, while the late Corey Haim is also seen for a nanosecond as a shirtless onlooker. Coolio's cameo is presumably nothing more than a celebrity using their clout to get a movie, but HAIM is a different matter. HAIM was actually on the shortlist to play Robin in Batman Forever, and given that HAIM and Joel Schumacher go all the way back to The Lost Boys a decade before, the director presumably threw his pal a bone by giving him a cameo in the film. And there you have it, folks, the 10 weirdest ever cameos in Batman movies. Feel free to drop this video a like if you enjoyed it, and drop me a follow on Twitter at @USlyDogU. I'm Will for What Culture, thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.